So this article today comes from the Socialist Party. This is their official newspaper, whatever source you want to call it. But I think this is really important because this article is written by a housing worker who is on the front lines of our housing crisis. And I think it's time we lived up and just admitted this is no longer a crisis. This is deliberately enforced by the Tories, who could have done something. Remember, they've been the party that has been in power long enough to be able to do something, to be able to mitigate these crises and to bring in policy to help that. But that hasn't been their case. Like I say, there hasn't been a housing minister in position longer than 6 months. So anyway, we get into it. So this is written by Jack Jeffrey, and he's a support worker for homeless people. So, I work at a homeless daycare centre in central London, supporting rough sleepers with severe mental health issues in an attempt to distract attention from his continued mismanagement of floods. Boris Johnson decided he would visit us and announce increased funding for rough sleeping projects. The format was odd, but not surprising. Considering his desire to avoid speaking to the public, instead of visiting the day centre, he would speak to 5 pre-prepared clients and then a 15-minute conversation with 5 members of staff. I was one. There was no charm of preparation, just bluster and complete disconnect from the lives of real people. He swanned in with Robert Jekyll, Secretary of State for Housing. He boasted that he planned to expand the Housing First by 6,000 beds and would eradicate homelessness. However, when impressed that this didn't even match the 9,000 hostel beds lost since 2010, he had no reply. He switched the conversation to increased funding for mental health provision. When I gave an example of a vulnerable client who had been unable to access treatment due to lack of beds, his face started to drop. Again, a change of topic, this time to drugs. In an attempt to dodge a question about the effect of local authority cuts on the substance abuse, he called for stricter laws. One of my colleagues raised decriminalisation in Portugal. Incredibly, his reply was, "What happened in Portugal?" When he heard that decriminalisation had led to a significant drop in addiction and drug-related crimes, he turned to confused to Robert Jerrick and asked Secretary of State, "Is this true?" Blustering, he mumbled, "I think so, Prime Minister." He made some poorly informed comments on social housing, then panicked and staggered off. When someone asked about saying about revoking right to buy. Only his media team and the Evening Standard were present. The whole interaction passed unreported, and it will soon be forgotten. At least it will manage to confirm that what I always expected, that there is no intelligence or cunning plan, and Boris Johnson really is just an idiot. And that's what happened. Like I say, this is right. It went completely unreported. There was only the Evening Standard there. And what you have there put forward just by those people saying, we could do this, and this to help this situation, which not only helps in the short term, but in the long term as well. Boris Johnson has no care. There is going to be... he's going to attempt, as he always is, as try and paping over the cracks of any short-term, any win that he can find to try and use. And as always, when you have, we've talked about this before about dry runs for fascism in this country. The state cannot appear weak. So when the stuff like this comes up, of course it goes unreported. Of course it goes unmanaged. So don't expect to hear this. And to be honest, the fact that even the housing minister there acknowledged, yeah, that was true. Whenever we have a talk about decriminalisation, it gets derailed into various other stuff, And we need to really have an open and adult conversation about this in Parliament. We need to have a look into this in a report and get it done, because decriminalisation works. Not only that, but it can provide another source of revenue for the government if they tax it and they regulate it appropriately. Like, treat it like alcohol. Like, you can't, operate heavy machinery, you can't drive while high, it can only be sold on licensed premises. There's so much the government can actually do to regulate it. And as you've seen in Portugal, massive lowering of addiction. Why? Because they treat it as a health problem and that people need treating, so they're not imprisoned. They're helped and treated. And again, if it's working in another country, take the model and just apply it to ours. It's very, very easy to do, but once again, this government does not care about the common working man, you or I, and even the most poorest, the most vulnerable in our society, the homeless. The government just doesn't care. It was a press opportunity that Boris wanted to say, we're doing this, this, and this. And then when questioned with reality and actual real life solutions that could work in this country, he just proved that once again, the reality of what was said at the end of that article, that Boris Johnson is just a colossal idiot.